I was with him one night in Seagate, Brooklyn, with a group of not just die-hard Hasidim, but people in the room were descendants of the greatest Hasidic dynasties. Spinka, I don't remember all the names anymore, Spinka comes up right now, but some of the greatest Hasidic dynasties. And they're sitting around a circle with him, and he's walking in with his guitar, and one of these descendants of one of these great Hasidic dynasties says, Shlomo, sing a bissl kumbaya. You know? So he brought out, I don't have to translate that one, I'm sure. You know? And Shlomo speaks universal language, you know. What he brought out in that chassid, he heard, so Shlomo said, you know when the last time I sang kumbaya, you know? So he says, yeah, probably when I heard it 20 years ago, you know. But it touched him. It touched the chassid, you know. And by the will of God, 24 hours later, I went to New Mexico to a compound where we met another great Rebbe, Yogi Bhajan. You know. And, you know, of course we arrived Shlomo time. You know, the Yoga Shlomo called them. They go to bed very early because they get up and say Shema very early. They do their callings at 4 in the morning or earlier, right? And you can tell me more about that than I can tell you, I'm sure. And it was so beautiful because when I entered the compound, I thought, I'm in a Hasidic court. They're walking around. While they're walking, they're reading books. And you know, Hasidim have long black robes. They have long white robes. And they're just so engrossed in their holiness and their consciousness. But Shlomo didn't land till classic Shlomo time, which we were supposed to start at 7. We didn't get there till 9:30. We didn't start till 10. And they never have to get up at 2 in the morning, you know? But sure enough, 10 o'clock at night, the tent was still 3/4 filled. Big tent. It was Peace Prayer Day. We were the grand for Shlomo. Shlomo was the grand finale. You know, to recreate the singing, the dancing, out of this world. I mean, he kept them going to 1 in the morning. I'm sure they didn't have much sleep that night. But the Shlomo, the concert is always after the concert is over. So after it's over, he starts talking to them. And I love listening to any conversation he had. And he goes over and he says, what's your name? And I mean to offend no one's sensitivities, but it was something like Yang, Wang, Bang, you know, Kalsa, you know. He knew how to speak to them. What was your name before then? Chaim, Shimon, David. Where are you from? The Bronx, Borough Park, Crown Heights. One kid came over, I'll never forget this, and he said, Ich bin a son zer Einikel. I am a descendant of the great Rebbe of sons. Who else can touch these souls but Shlomo? You know? No long black robes, white robes. These are the hippies of the 60s. Now we're in the 80s. They're got a little gray in their beard already. But they're still on that level, you know? And there is no world that man didn't try and couldn't bridge. And 1 minute didn't forget that his mission is to create that bridge. And how desperately we need that. I was with him once. I loved walking with him at 2 in the morning going Broadway because the way he would hug and embrace the homeless, it's a story unto itself. But we would go shopping at 2 o'clock in the morning too. And we go into this little store off Broadway, and he picks up a little this, a little that, and we're at the counter. And never forget this. There was an Oriental Korean, I don't mean to be racial, but I'll just describe it as I remember it. There was a Korean, probably store owner, or he was running, a store manager, whatever he was. And there was a hungry black brother who walked into the store too. And he obviously needed to help himself to something, and he didn't have anything in his pocket. And the storekeeper sees him walking out. And the way he ran after him, and the way he grabbed him and emptied his pocket and yelled on the top of his lungs. Shlomo puts the food down and says, Sammy, this place is treif, I can't buy food here. And Shlomo did not encourage theft, don't get me wrong. In a minute I'll share my version of the teaching as I remember it of his. on what happened on a deeper level a minute ago. But Reb Shlomo was incapable of hearing a human being in pain. Either he would try to resolve it, and he knew this one he couldn't. He knew he could not in any way communicate to this Korean, and he knew that he couldn't, so he just had to walk out of that energy. I've seen him other times step in and with no language barrier, put himself right, but it was 2 a.m, he was beat. There were infinite reasons, but he couldn't, Stories told that the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov one time were coming back to him. They stopped off in this kreishman, this inn, and the innkeeper wanted to give them food, and they tell their Rebbe, "You'd be so proud of us. We were so meticulous in the food we would get into our body. We asked the innkeeper 1,000 questions to make 100% sure that the food is mamash kosher." Baal Shem answered them, "You were very worried about the kashrut that came into your mouth. I'm a little concerned that you weren't so worried about the kashrut that came out of your mouth." There's multiple levels of kosher that goes through and out of our mouth, And just to sort of take the story on a Reb Nachman level, Reb Shlomo gave it over, and I'm ending it a little bit maybe differently. This is how I understood it, but there are tapes that have it slightly differently. But Reb Nachman said, there are 3 levels of truth. Reb Shlomo would say, one is emes, truth. Truth is truth, right? One is emes ha-emes, the truth of the truth. But the highest level is emet ha-shalom, the truth that makes peace. The truth of peace. What's emet, he said? I walk down the street and I see a child steal a loaf of bread. I go over to that child and I say, no. And immediately I go over to that child and I spank that child and grab that piece of bread and say, you're not allowed to steal. It's the truth, you're not. And the child's got to be told, you're not. First level of emet. But then there's emet ha-emet. I walk down the street, see a child steal a loaf of bread. Okay. Wrong. My first reaction, grab that child. I think a little bit. Maybe that child hasn't eaten in days. Maybe that child is starving. Also truth. And I have 2 emets brewing in me. Emet to emet. They're both truth. So the way I understand the 3rd level, there are other ways of ending it. The way I understand the 3rd level is emet ha-shalom is walk down the street, see that child steal a loaf of bread, gut reaction, grab that child, deeper reaction, slow down, that child is starving. Hear the truth there, but maybe my heart is a little bit bleeding, it's hurting me, but what am I going to do? I can't walk around a confused soul either. I need to make shalom. I need to go over to that child, first give that child a hug, and say to that child, you're not allowed to steal. If you ever need a loaf of bread, ask. And if someone won't give it to you, go somewhere else and ask. Keep on asking, you will find someone who'll give it to you. I assure you. But don't steal. It's not good for your soul, not good for your body. It's the unhealthiest thing in the world for you. Emet ha-shalom. We've got to make peace with the truthful challenges that we have in our life. We're living in a culture where the 30-second soundbite and the surface label governs our lives. He's liberal, he's conservative. If you're liberal, you got to do this. If you're conservative, you got to do that. You're forced to be driven by the agenda that you identify with, or the world labels you at. And you can't think past 30 seconds. And Reb Shlomo would not allow himself to not think for depth, for inner consciousness. And all what I'm telling you about his universalism and his infiniteness and his caring for the homeless and caring for people, The man was infinitely involved in infinite lives, talking to them, helping them, hearing their problems, calling at 3 in the morning because it's only 12 at night in California, and it's already 9 in the morning in Israel. And being in touch with people and connecting and literally saving lives. I want to end by sharing 2 stories about Reb Shlomo that I heard from 2 different sources, each story. One is from Reb Shlomo, and one is posthumously from the way the story evolved, and it was told not through him, but through the other protagonists, to the other people in the story, the other actors in the story. And to really understand that his stories are not stories that are little myths. You know, I love scholars, but I hate that word hagiography because it's destroying our ability to look at a human being that does amazing, infinite, godly things, and to say, yes, that kind of human being needs to be honored, needs to be emulated, and it's not a mitzvah to always look for the bad in a person. It's not a mitzvah to always try to find what's wrong in them and to do exposés as the media loves to do right now. That is fake news, right or left, call it what you want to. I'm on neither side, I'm on all sides. They're all good people and they all have button pushers to themselves. But we need to start being able to have heroes in life again, holy heroes in life again, Rebbes in life again, and that can be all of us. We don't need to look for the bad in ourselves. We need to look for the good in us. We don't need to learn from the bad. We need to learn from the good. And yes, we need to highlight the good. We need to spread the good. We need to stop being a culture that needs to expose the dark side of every human being. And think that's the whole story of life. It's a sickness. It's going to pass, God willing. And a little bit I blame the whole intellectual world because they think they're disinterested in their studies. They're objective. We want to be subjective in our studies. We want to be alive. We want to feel it. We want to worship it in the deepest way. We want it to be a service of life, a service of divinity, not a disinterested intellectual dissertation. What's that worth? Except for the professor who makes money teaching it. The other students will become professors teaching it. We need the living Torah, my dear friends. Let's honor the holy deeds that any human being does and not look to balance it out. Life has a way of balancing it out. They're going to be people that are going to say things that are the negative. Our obligation, the power of not speaking Lashon Hara is so deep. Of course, they're going to be people that are going to, and of course we need to hear other sides when they come up. Of course we do. But don't detract from the greatness and the infinite holiness that every human being has within them. The potential to do amazing things because they can do bad things too. And it all needs to be in some way compartmentalized, of course, and honored. But what we really need to do after we expose whatever we expose is to honor the good in all of humanity and to emulate it and to study it and to make it our living Torah. So the 2 stories I want to share with you